All right, welcome in. You are listening and I guess watching too the Automotive Repair News Today podcast. I'm Braxton, your host. And if you are checking us out on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications when new content like this comes out. Because we want to keep you informed. That's the idea of the show. The vision behind the podcast is to let you know what's happening around the automotive industry so that if you're in a repair shop as a technician or owner, you know what's coming up, you know, new technologies, new things to implement, new trainings coming up. But, you know, you're also a consumer perhaps, and you kind of just have a knowledge and an interest in the industry and you want to keep it up to date. That's for you too. And for whatever else reason you're checking out the podcast, hit the subscribe button and would love to have you following along on the podcast. Today, I have Alan Kohler. He is with Odyssey Battery, and we're going to talk about batteries and why they're different. So, Alan Kohler, is there any connection to the clothing store? I just off the top need to know. It's spelled the same except drop the last two letters. I mean,
No,
you're
but
wearing a nice shirt today. That could be something you bought from Kohl's.
work bought this for me. But no, what I usually get, being the last name Kohler, is either the small engines that they put in lawnmowers and things. That's Kohler brand, and the sinks, faucets, and toilets, which is also Kohler.
That's
So
yeah. Well, that's spelled a little different, isn't it?
no, it's the same as mine.
It is.
Kohler, both of them, and I get that all the time. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, not.
So is this your first Kohl's comparison or?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, well, I guess I'll pat myself on the back after the podcast, but thought that was an obvious connection. You mean you could model
Shopped
for
here.
Kohl's? You look nice in that polo, but
Thank you.
okay. Odyssey batteries. So there's a couple things. There's a new Odyssey Connect was just released. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to hear about. You can just to tease what we're going to talk about. Some batteries voltages that you can monitor on your phone using an app. Really cool system that just released with Odyssey. But I guess the first thing that you had mentioned, you know, wanting to clear the air about and to let people know is uh, TPPL batteries are the type of batteries that you guys create, but it's different. So for my listeners who know me, I'm not, you know, I can talk about the industry. I know what's going on. I cover the news, but I'm not an auto guy. So I don't know much about cars, much less batteries. So I don't know what the difference is. So you educate me and educate the listener on why you guys are different.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, cars have been using lead acid batteries for starting purposes for, geez, many decades, right? So, and really, the technology, the basic technology of a lead acid battery, has not changed for decades, right? Back in the day, you might have had a 6 volt battery in your '57 Chevy or whatever, but 12 volt batteries have been around for a long time, and they have always been what we consider a flooded lead acid battery. I mean, cars on dealer's lot today will sit there with a regular old flooded lead acid battery. So it's still a viable technology. I don't see it going away anytime soon. But there are a couple variations of that, right? So, it was maybe like late '80s, early '90s where cars started to use what they call AGM batteries. So AGM stands for absorbed glass mat. So that refers to the material that's in between the positive and negative plates on the battery, is able to absorb the acid, right? So in a flooded battery, the acid just kind of floats around in there. The plates are floating around in there. In an AGM battery, the acid's absorbed and it's actually packed a lot tighter. So not only can you get more plates in there, it's more vibration resistant because of how tight it is. So AGM batteries, like I said, they've been around for a while too, but still not a lot of cars use them. If you've seen any cars where batteries may be in the trunk or underneath the seat, typically, a lot of higher end European cars, they will typically use AGM batteries, but for the most part, not so much. And then what we did, and Odyssey's been around since 1996. What we did is we went one step above that. So we actually call it AGM2, just to say it's one step better than a regular AGM. And as you mentioned, that's made out of what we call TPPL, which is thin plate pure lead. So two things there. One being it's made out of actual pure lead, so it's brand new, you know, untainted uh, mined lead. It goes directly into the batteries. And then the thin plate part of that is just kind of what I was talking about a minute ago with the AGM. Um, the thinner you can make a plate, the more you can put in a battery, and more plates you can put in a battery, more cranking power you have. So again, we dialed ours into those two factors. And if you're going shopping for a battery at an auto parts store today, you walk in the door, you can get several different levels of even a regular flooded lead acid battery, where there's different warranties, different power ratings, stuff like that. So call it the good, better, best scenario, right? So you walk in the door, you just decide what you want and what you need, right? So if you don't need anything great, you can buy the cheapest one that's on the shelf. But if you want to, upgrade, there's definitely different options you can go to. One of the things that we take into consideration these days, where you didn't have to 20 years ago, is just the fact that cars have a lot more electronics. So those batteries are doing more work than what they used to. Um, Cars that have start stop, interesting thing there is, as soon as that engine stops running, you're running all of your systems off your battery, right?
Ooh,
And
right.
then yeah, so that, as you can imagine, that puts a good load on that battery. And then every time you pull out from the light, it starts it again. So think of how many times you're starting that battery in your car every time you're driving down the road. So that really, really beats up batteries.
And
So
so
they learned,
it'll the battery won't last as long, right? Because
right,
I've always thought
exactly,
about that. My car is not start stop, but my father-in-law's is, and I've driven it a few times, and I'm not a fan of that.
right. A lot of
Uh,
people aren't.
but I've just thought, like, man, I mean, it can't be good for I didn't think just the battery. I was like, all the mechanisms in this
Exactly. Yeah.
car that are constantly, especially if you're driving through town, stopping and starting at
Mhm.
stoplight and stop signs. Like, man, this poor car is like having to put in overtime for what? I mean,
So yeah. So what happens when you have a normal starting battery, and you start your engine for the 2 seconds it takes to fire that engine over,
yep.
then your alternator takes over and it starts charging the battery, right? So in the start stop cars, as you can imagine, you're using that battery a lot, and it's really cycling it deeply, right? So if you think about deep cycle batteries, where you're using those, they've typically used those in the marine industry, whatever else. Your battery has to be able to do that. It has to be able to go down to a much lower voltage than what a normal starting battery does. So the car manufacturers and the battery manufacturers actually got together when that whole thing came out, and they came out with what they call an EFB, or an enhanced flooded battery. So still that original flooded style battery construction, but they tweak it a little bit so that it has a little bit more of a deep cycle capability. So that's how they're getting away with being able to beat those batteries up, and have them last a little bit, is have a slightly better battery. But over and above that, the AGM and the AGM2, the TPPL, is really a much better battery. So maybe they don't put the expense into the car out of the gate by getting the best of the best, but you're absolutely obviously more than welcome to upgrade all the way to that, and your battery will definitely last longer. The pure lead itself in the Odyssey battery is what allows for that deep cycle. So we say in our specs, it's like uh, 400 cycles at 80% depth of discharge. That means you can go through 80% of the 100%, right? Discharge that battery, basically kill it 400 times. And that's a big number as compared to a standard battery. I mean, the standard batteries might only get a dozen, I mean, and then they're toast.
A
So
couple dozen.
or a couple or a dozen, yeah, like like maximum.
So you're saying what is, I mean, 400
Mhm.
to, a couple to a dozen.
Right.
That's I don't even
Big,
know the math on that. That's pretty incredible.
no, for sure. And like I said, that's with the newer vehicles. You really do got to take into consideration what you really need. I mean, there's Some places, if you're looking at a catalog, it'll tell you, oh, you need an EFB battery or you need an AGM battery. So you can't go backwards, right? You can't use the lower capacity versions, but you can always upgrade, right?
Hmm.
So that's why we make the best of the best, and cover all those applications.
Um, what's your relationship with the aftermarket? So, I mean, obviously, you mentioned you're supplying like the O'Reillys of the world, the Advanced Auto Parts, all of that stuff. So, with the aftermarket, with repair shops, they go get their parts from some of these stores. How often do you connect with owners of repair shops and, you know, pick their brain about the type of batteries that they recommend for customers? And I mean, I'm sure you deal a lot with, you know, user or car owners
Right.
and manufacturers who like I mentioned the O'Reillys of the world, but how often are you able to connect with an owner and talk about what their expertise is and their likes dislikes about batteries?
Probably not nearly as enough as we should, and that's why we're here today, trying to get the word out. I mean, we welcome any questions from anybody. I do get a lot of questions from consumers looking to upgrade, but yeah, where a shop may not be fully aware of all the options and why you need those options.
Do
That's
you
what we're
know
here
the
for.
percentage? And this is just a random question that came into my mind, and that's okay if you don't know the answer. But how often do consumers generally go to a service store to purchase a battery and have it installed versus at the repair shop to fix a dead battery? I
Yeah.
would think and this is just my experience, I guess, more people probably go to the store to just buy the battery, have it installed rather than the repair shop, you know.
Yeah, and I think with people like AutoZone and Advanced and O'Reilly's that will sell you the battery and install it. That's why they do it, right? They want your money. They don't want you going to the repair shop.
Right.
But the thing about repair shops is, say you have an electrical problem or you don't know that it's your battery. You take it to the
Right.
repair shop. They can test it. They can analyze your system. Maybe it's your alternator, and then give you the right solution. As in this case, possibly the replacement of a battery. So I'd say it's fairly even. But and then you got your do-it-yourselfers too that don't even want
Yeah.
the auto parts store guy to touch his car, right? So there's different ways, but again, it's getting the word out to everyone through the chain is difficult. That's why this is an important podcast we're doing there. Hopefully, we reach some people
So
and they can
you,
understand.
what was the term again? You got it's 400 what
It was
for Odyssey batteries?
400 cycles
400.
to
Okay, so 400 cycles,
yep.
and you were saying 2 to a dozen for your average battery. What's the next standard like? Okay, 400 cycles for Odyssey batteries for an excellent another brand battery. What's the top of the line cycles? Because 400 seems like a large number.
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm just aware that most of them are very, very low. I don't know if we've done any kind of competitive testing against the
It just seems to me
closer
like you're
competition.
the standard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, on the high end, definitely. It's interesting because in most auto parts stores, we're not even on the shelf, right? We're more or less special order. We're in the warehouse, right? So you can walk into an auto parts store, and I mentioned you have multiple different options, and one of those options is an AGM battery. So, and not all battery sizes are made in AGM, but if you walk in the door and just say, I mean, there's people like that. Just say, I want the best of the best, right? I don't
Right.
want the cheap stuff. I don't have to come back and replace it in a year. I don't want to deal with
Hmm.
warranty. Give me the best one so I don't have to come back. I don't care about the cost, right? So typically they'll sell them the highest end, which is the AGM, which again has some benefits similar to ours because ours are AGM as well. But if those counter people aren't aware that we have the better option in the warehouse, they wouldn't even know to upsell in this case. But like I said, there's a reason for what we make, the reason where it's more expensive. And yeah, that's why we're trying to let everybody know.
Right. Okay, so tell me about Odyssey Connect. I teased it a minute ago. Something you're testing, I believe, in the trucking industry. So,
Mhm.
Odyssey Connect. Let me know what this is about, because the way you were describing it earlier, it sounded pretty cool.
Yeah, so something that's been in the works for a while. Obviously with technology the way it is today, it's great to be able to push a button or pull up an app and be able to do anything you want to do, right? So one of the reasons why we actually developed it in the trucking industry first, keep in mind, a sleeper cab truck can have 8 batteries, and they're big batteries, so they're not cheap. So think of the investment a fleet of trucks is with batteries,
Yeah.
and the downtime it creates if you have a problem, whether it be a jump start or having to bring it in to replace the batteries. There's so much warranty dollars, so much downtime dollars that goes into play there, that we said, well, we need a better way to understand what's going on, right? To help our customers. So this particular product is a chip that's embedded in the battery, and then it talks to an app on your phone, and it will tell you a bunch of things about your battery's health. How it's been charging, voltage wise, temperature wise. So there's a lot of stuff that we can pull from there. The data goes to the cloud. Pull from there and see what kind of life this battery's having. Are we exceeding those 400 cycles?
Yeah.
So it's been a very great tool for the trucking industry, and there was a lot of hype around it, just in the battery industry as a whole. And so very quickly we turned that on to the marine industry. So as you can imagine, those batteries, especially if you're using like a trolling motor or something like that, those batteries cycle a lot, and they're multiple batteries. So again, there's a lot of expense involved with somebody having a battery set up, and they want to be able to protect it. So
Hmm.
that's the way to do it. And then the ultimate goal is to bring this through pretty much our entire battery line. Obviously, if we're going to do an automotive anytime soon, it would be in the popular sizes first. But eventual goal is to really have this available to every consumer, for every application.
That's great. I mean, I think this is good for me, good for the consumer too, to think about, because I'm the kind of person, um, that generally, not that I don't care about cost, but generally I want the best for my vehicle, because I'm that kind of person that when I get in the car, I'm usually pressed for time. I got things to do, places to be, and I want my car to be reliable.
Right.
It was expensive, but we got my wife some new wiper blades for her car, and we got the best of the best on there, and there was $120 total. I mean, it was high.
Wow.
But when it rains, I want her to be safe on the road. Uh, and it's same for batteries. I'd rather not have to replace it every year. I want it to last as long as possible, but also, you know, operate all the things it needs to in the car as best as capable. So, I think it's good to know that there's options out there, especially like you mentioned, if you're a stop start car owner, that you know it's draining the battery a lot faster than others, and having one that can have up to 400 fails and it can manage that is pretty important to know. So, um, anything else you'd like to get out there, Alan?
Yeah, it's funny. You and I were talking before we jumped on this podcast about the weather and temperatures, and that's another thing that's very very important in battery ownership, car ownership, right? Is climate, where you live. So uh, people that own a car and live in Phoenix, Arizona, they will tell us. I mean, people will come up to us at shows and events and say, "Man, I only get a year out of my battery, and it's dead." I said, "Because it's brutal hot. Batteries can't handle it. What do you guys have that's going to get me more than a year, right?" And that is one of the things, again, with Odyssey, that it's very, very temperature tolerant, high end and low end. So we are able to get people better life in high temperatures, as well as low temperatures. So same thing applies. If you live in Anchorage, Alaska, imagine how you beat up a battery trying to start that in minus double digits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, a battery's got to be well built and robust enough to be able to handle those types of things. And again, that's one of the things we pride ourselves
And
on.
and I think this is good for folks who do work in a repair shop, owners, technicians, to know this information, because
Mhm.
so many repair shops that are in this industry that go to these training events are in the business to help their customers have a safe vehicle, but also just do the best possible work. And if you're going to recommend a battery, I mean, why not recommend the best that can handle all these things? And so it's good to know if you're a shop owner, look
Yeah,
into Odyssey Battery and, provide the best for your customers. So, Alan, thank you.
no problem. Thanks for having me.